Well, good afternoon and welcome everyone to this next in our KeystoneREN webinar series. I'm Jennifer Oxenford, the Chief Relationship Officer at KeystoneREN, which is the statewide research and education network in Pennsylvania. We are delighted to have you all joining us here today for this webinar on understanding the power of federations InCommon and eduroam. And in our conversations with the KeystoneREN community, we know that many campuses, and in particular, smaller and sometimes under-resourced campuses, often tell us that they're interested in using federations, participating in InCommon, and that they're considering or have been working on rolling out eduroam, but for a variety of reasons, sometimes tell us that there are challenges or that they hit some obstacles, some roadblocks in the successful use and deployment of these enabling technologies. And so in our webinar today, we seek to provide a high-level overview of federations, including why institutions should consider using them and how to get started. And we'll aim to answer questions that you may have and maybe even dispel a few myths about federations that may be keeping you and your organization from using them to their fullest advantage. This is a very informal webinar today, but we'll ask that you go ahead and keep your questions until the end. We promise we'll save plenty of time to have interactive discussion with each of you and to try to address any questions and dispel any of those myths that you or your colleagues may want to dispel today. But I'm delighted to have joining us today two of our outstanding colleagues from Internet2, Rami Bolton, Interim Associate Vice President for Trust and Identity at Internet2, and Jean Horachevsky, Director of the InCommon Academy at Internet2, to share this overview and to speak with you all today. So Jean and Rami, welcome.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We're excited to be here and very excited to meet all of you. Yeah, we're ready to go. So,
Yeah, I think, Jennifer, you said a thing that really got my attention with the myth busting, because that's actually something we talk about internally quite a bit. And that is one of our goals here is to provide some information and then answer some questions for you. And I hope we do get to bust some myths, as they say.
Right. Just the next slide, Rami, is all about our agenda. So we're just going to tell you a little bit about who we are in case you're less familiar, tell you a little bit more about just federations broadly, but dives right into InCommon Federation and eduroam and give you a closer look at what's available and why you might care and some real world use cases that might resonate with you. And then how can we help? How can we help you, your REN, get connected, get onboarded, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of our agenda today. And we hope to leave at least 15 minutes at the end, as Jennifer and Rami says, to answer questions. So yeah, keep on going. So what is InCommon? I'll start, Rami. So we want to just
webinar.
dive right in. All right. So what is InCommon? Well, let's go to the next slide. Before we even talk about what InCommon is, first, what is Internet2? I bet most of you on this call probably know who we are, but just in case. So we're a nonprofit tech organization. We were founded by and guided by the higher ed community ever since 1996. We have built and we operate a high-speed, secure national research and education network. And we connect over 300 universities, federal agencies, regional networks, global partners, and we support over 100,000 community anchor institutions. And we have all sorts of services coming through Net Plus Cloud services that are geared specifically to the higher ed community. Next slide. So what does InCommon at Internet2 do? Well, InCommon is a company of Internet2, and we are focused on identity and access management specifically. And our unique mission is really to support secure and seamless access for institutions like yours to be able to access resources elsewhere or engage in interorganizational collaboration and that sort of thing. And so we really have two major functions that help do all of this. The first one is eduroam. That is where we facilitate wireless access. And many of you probably either use it or have heard of it or want to use it. And we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into what eduroam is and again, why you should care. But the second one is InCommon Federation. And through InCommon Federation, institutions can more securely share resources, collaborate, and get access to things in a much more seamless and unified way. And being part of the Federation opens up a whole ecosystem of things that you can access. And we're going to show you a few slides that we hope really resonate with you in just a few minutes. Keep going, Rami. So a little bit more about InCommon on the next slide.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Hang on a minute. Did it go?
All right. Yes, we're
Okay.
there. So just a little bit more overview of InCommon. So we really provide IAM, Identity and Access Management Solutions. We have some specialized tools, and we offer some strategic guidance that's specific to the R&E community. So what do we have? We have software. We have the Trusted Access Platform. You might have heard about these components. You might use them, but these are open source software components that have been built by the community, and they are designed to help you run your campus identity and access management infrastructure. Security is next, and it's really everything. It's all what we're all about when it comes to our certificate service. And yes, these certificates handle the usual SSL for web security, but they're needed for eduroam and Federation. I'm going to be telling you a lot more about the Academy since that's what I oversee, but we offer training and all kinds of different programs and learning experiences specifically tailored to the R&E community to help everyone learn, advance, and sort of innovate together. We also have a carefully vetted 12 Catalyst partners who work alongside us. And these are not vendors. These are actually community partners and consulting companies who understand and come from the R&E community, and they help with targeted integration needs, and they offer support services that help your initiatives move along a lot faster. And the last one, and probably the most important piece of this whole page, is that we are all about community development and engagement. So it's not just that we're providing tools. We sit at a really unique position where we help convene the community and help facilitate ways in which we work together so that we're advancing everything all together. And we are more like a backbone organization that helps make that happen. So that's just a little bit about us. Rami, actually keep going. So we're going to be diving a little bit more deeply into federations, and Rami's going to cover that. But if we still stay at the 50,000 foot view level, what are we talking about when we say federation with a lowercase f? So federation just means it's a group of independent organizations that want to collaborate or share resources in some kind of secure way that's based in some sort of common standards and protocols. So organizations agree to accept each other's authenticated users using some sort of common broker. So this helps eliminate the need to have all these individual relationships and agreements between every single service and every other organization that you want to interact with. So if you have single sign-on today, you already have some form of federation, and we just kind of scale that up a little bit. Keep going. So we talked briefly already about eduroam and InCommon, and this is just sort of the side-by-side comparison in a nutshell. So on the left is eduroam, and think of it as your global Wi-Fi access. You all have traveled, you all know what it feels like when you're trying to find wireless connection and you can't, and you don't know what the password is, and it's protected and that sort of thing. With eduroam, this enables global Wi-Fi access, and you'll see more later. It's in many, many locations, but it enables one login, secure and seamless access, and really supports mobility. So whether it's you, whether it's a researcher, whether it's a student, whether it's a staff person who's working at home, studying abroad, doing international conferences, you can get connected as long as eduroam is available. On the right is InCommon Federation, and this is more about the trust fabric between organizations that want to collaborate or share resources. So again, single sign-on, easy to use your home credentials to be able to access other services, other resources. And this really helps on the back end front. So if any of you are responsible for the identity and access management needs of your institution, it takes a lot of time and effort to manage individual accounts, and this really streamlines that process. So we're going to tell you more, but Rami, I think next we're going to we're not going to turn it over to you just yet, because both of these models allow these kinds of shared principles. It's really about protecting user data and privacy. Both of them are built on established standards. Both of them allow you, the institution, to remain in control. You get to decide what gets shared, who has access. I think maybe the most important piece of this puzzle is the seamless experience. We want a really great, smooth user experience for all of your constituents and your stakeholders, right? And both of them help with that. And this is not governed just by InCommon. This is governed with the policies and the practices by the community. So, all right. Now, Rami, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay.
I think you'll dive in to eduroam a little bit more.
I am. I'm going to talk about several things here. So we're going to start with eduroam. I'm curious, is anybody here already using eduroam in any way?
A number of our members are.
Okay.
It's interesting though, and we probably cover it later. Most of the USM schools, I'm from Maryland,
Okay.
are not that many of the community colleges are, and as far as I know, few or none of the K-12s are. So those are question marks for us.
Okay. Well, stay tuned because I'm going to hit on all of those things. So eduroam, for a little bit about the growth. So eduroam originated in Europe. And if you are an eduroam participant here in the US and you go to Europe, you will see it literally everywhere. You will walk down the street and eduroam is popping up from coffee shops and museums and the Central Market in Valencia. That's one of my favorite stories. We are the US operator for eduroam. So InCommon Internet 2 is the US operator. It's grown like crazy here. And anybody that's used it, some of the places you walk in any of the Smithsonian museums. So that always is a lot of fun in the summer when we get students, I actually, in my family, so they all know I have something to do with eduroam. They don't know what exactly, but I have something to do with it. So I'm forever getting pictures from my nieces and younger friends who are somewhere in Europe, and they're always holding up their phone that says eduroam, which I love that. And it's for those who know Kevin Maroney, one of my favorite statements from Kevin when I first started was I was helping to migrate eduroam from a different backend provider to the one that we're using currently. And he said, whatever you do, don't break eduroam. It's the only thing I do that my family understands. So I always keep that in mind, that eduroam is the thing that people get. And I worked on a campus for about 20 years, and I was also an adjunct professor in the College of Business at Iowa. So I always had a lot of fun with the students talking about eduroam. But to your point, Jerry, one of the things that we're doing right now is we already had expanded to libraries and museums and various, where you find us in some airports, like in Florida, we're in the airport there. But the K-12 aspect, I'm going to talk about in a few slides, but it's a new and really kind of exciting area. So what happens with eduroam? eduroam fills a bunch of use cases for every member of the campus. So the students, as they're migrating around to various affiliate campuses or going to a coffee shop, there's an ice cream store in Nebraska that has eduroam. So you find it in these places, and that's a very localized aspect of it. But as I was saying, when students are studying abroad, it gives them that instantaneous safe space to connect back to their home institution. And obviously, it's using the Radius protocol for authentication and the whole identity provider and service provider aspect of that. Faculty travel all over the place. So as they attend conferences, eduroam again gives that seamless, secure aspect, so they can operate at the place they're visiting as well as connecting with their home institution. And the same with researchers. It really is just that frictionless piece. And what I find in my space is feeling safe, right? There's open networks all over the place now, and you go to an airport or a hotel, and it gives you all the warnings. This is not secure, and it's a nice thing to have that ability to get online and roam someplace and not worry about the security aspect. Here are some of the locations in the U.S. This is a map on our website. I'd be happy to share the link, but you can drill into each of those circles and it gives you very specific information where eduroam is available. And then this is worldwide. I was just at a conference in Europe and heard a really interesting presentation from Renew, which is the Research and Education Network of Uganda. And they have deployed it in these most amazing ways with very small devices, because they're operating at great geographic distances. But you can traverse a great deal of Africa and hit eduroam as you go from country to country within Africa. So I've kind of espoused the benefits as I've talked through this, but you can see the global connectivity, the security piece, reduced support, so that on your campus, when you stand up eduroam and you have visitors come to your campus, there's no worrying about guest accounts. They just connect like they would at their home institution. So it works as you're traveling and as people travel to you. So this is a newer program, our eduroam support org, ESO, as we fondly refer to it. And this is designed to roll it out to K-12. Right, so we have several states now that are using eduroam. Utah was our first one. I was part of that effort back in 2019, and UETN is the REN there, and they are incredible. So Jim Stewart is, I'm sure, Jennifer, you know Jim, probably maybe some of your others know Jim Stewart. He's a character, but he has a vision. He had the vision for the ESO program in the state of Utah. And it quickly scaled. We ran 2 or 3 year pilot there to figure out, can we do this? How's this going to work? What does it take from our side? But more importantly, what does it take from the regional side? What did they have to do? What kind of boots on the ground? How can we set that up? And so after Utah, we rolled it into an official program after that pilot. And we now have, I'm not going to get them all because there's too many, which is a good problem to have. But Washington, Oregon, Utah, Arizona, Nebraska, Minnesota, Michigan, Connecticut, and then we have 3 new ones that will be announced shortly this year. They've been selected and notified. It's a process because it is an interesting set of problems that you run into, or new challenges, new opportunities. It's a program that an organization has to apply to, and we try to help make sure that regional is set up to do all the things that we know they're going to face as they try to roll this out. So this is an exciting program that it really gets that K-12 population into the eduroam space, but then it sort of ends up creeping over into higher ed, because these students, they're now used to eduroam, right? They've had eduroam their entire junior high and high school career, and as they move on, as they matriculate, it just works seamlessly, and it ends up being a help for schools later on, because the kids are like, oh yeah, they have eduroam, I get that. All right, so that's all on eduroam. I'm going to talk a little bit about our other federation, which is the InCommon SAML Federation. Really, what this is about is, it's in reference to the federation Jean talked about earlier, but this is the capital F1. This is the one that we run. And it's really entirely based on organizations getting together and agreeing to operate in a certain fashion. There are established rules and requirements and what we call baseline expectations for how you're going to operate. And as you do all of those things, you become a trusted member of the federation. And then all the schools that are using your services, or you're accessing their services, everybody knows that we're all operating within a common framework, and that I can feel confident and secure in who I'm working with. Whoever's coming in as a visitor to one of my service providers that I'm operating, I can trust that they're doing the right things in the right way. A few use cases for this. Research collaboration, federal grants access. We work very closely with the NIH and the NSF. I'll talk about that on a slide later on, but both the NIH and the NSF are really increasing their security requirements around access to grants and grant management. And we've been working with them closely for the last 6 years, and especially over the course of the last 2 years. NSF made some big changes in October last year with the ability to access grant management, and then the NIH has some things that are announced that are going to be rolling out over the rest of this year and next year. I'll talk about some of these in my specific examples, but there's also resource access and course sharing is a new place that we're kind of sticking our toe in. It's not a place that we spent a lot of time thinking about, because we tend to live in the first 2 boxes. But the course sharing thing, with the challenges of the enrollment cliff, as well as just the shrinking budgets of colleges and universities, this ability to course share is becoming more and more a strategy that we're seeing. Because I want to keep you in my home campus, but I also understand you need this specialty course someplace else. So being able to make that a little more operationalized so I can be, and I could try my Pennsylvania geography. I could say Slippery Rock because one of my favorite basketball coaches came from Slippery Rock. And they want to take a course that they can only get at UPenn or something like that, as an example. So we'll talk more about that. So a little bit, just very high level, how does this work? And it's the trust fabric I was talking about. So all of these people, the identity providers and the service providers are all doing their thing. And it's schools, museums, wherever. And then the InCommon Federation operator, which is us, are helping to make sure that everybody is following the rules, and we're helping get people set up and do the right thing. So that's the green box is us as InCommon, and the yellow and blue boxes are the schools and the other entities that are interacting with us as service providers and identity providers. So just really quickly, I don't know if anybody here doesn't know what this is, what an identity provider is and a service provider, but Brett Bieber from the University of Nebraska explained it to me in this way that just made so much sense. And like the driver's license is the identity provider, and all of these other people need something from your driver's license depending on what they're doing. So the police officer, as you're speeding to the airport, they want to make sure that you actually have a driver's license. They don't really care so much about what your date of birth is in this case. The TSA agent wants to make sure that you are who you are. And then when you finally get there and you've had a horrible drive and you sit down at the bar to kind of recuperate before your flight, that bartender is looking for something entirely different. They do care about your birthday. So it's kind of that aspect of the identity provider has all the info, and each of those service providers is looking for specific things. They don't need all the things, but they're looking for specific things. And so as we talk further about the trust fabric, it's making sure that all of those groups are interacting in a secure manner. If the bartender only needs my birth date, they don't need to be sharing whether I'm an organ donor, how tall I am, because that's not in their list of attributes that they need to do their thing. But the police officer does want to know some of that stuff. And this foundationally is where InCommon Federation draws its trust fabric from, is that ability. All right, so Federation services that we have. So we have things called service providers, SPs. When you connect to an SP, as I was talking about, the police officer and the bartender in the airport, as you join InCommon and you federate and you publish your metadata, you get access to certain service providers that are already in there and just waiting for you. And those fall into a variety of categories. There are service providers that require a contract. So it's something that a commercial operator that you already deal with. Some of the examples I use are StarRes. If you're running a campus, you know what StarRes is because that's doing all your housing and dining. You might be using Handshake, runs your student job fairs and helps with student access to things. But it's somebody that you've already signed a contract with, and this just gives you that SSO capability. Out of the box, things that you get just by being in the Federation. I'll talk more about these. Content behind a paywall. So these are kind of the categories we use to categorize our service providers that you might access. This kind of represents what I was just talking about. So when you join the InCommon Federation, these are all logos of service providers we have, and there are many more, about 6,000, as Jean referenced earlier. But these are the ones that tend to resonate when we're talking to people on campuses. In 2019, I would argue probably 33% of the people knew who Zoom was. 110% now know who Zoom is. So that's a capability that you would have, is to be able to directly work with them. StarRes, EduGain, you can see all of this, and I think we're leaving these slides, this slide in particular, as a leave behind, so people can refer to this. But this really illustrates all the stuff that sits behind the Federation once you join that you can access one time, set it up, it's ready to go. Okay, a few that I'm just going to touch on, and again, not go into great detail. This was the NIH one I was talking about in the fall of 2020. That's when that security ratchet up, we really noticed that was starting to happen. There was a privacy issue. So they wanted to make some changes to their security protocols, and they worked directly with us because we had, at that time, most of a significant number of the institutions that access the NIH, the Research One schools, all worked with InCommon, so we were able to help them support them as in their effort to increase security. So that was an example of the Federation helping. The NSF just did this last year. As I was mentioning earlier, they had a Dear Colleague letter that went out in November that they immediately, and it was a 10-day notice, required multi-factor authentication to get into grant administration. And then they also, it's coming right now, is they wanted to require phishing resistant MFA. That became a little bit trickier because that definition for that actually doesn't exist. So we have been internally working with our community, as Jean mentioned earlier, gathering them together and working to come up with a community definition of phishing resistant MFA. And it's a group, I don't know, 12 to 15 people, and they're working on that right now. And in collaboration with the NSF, we'll talk about what exactly is the precise definition of phishing resistant MFA and how do you measure that. A couple of other examples. This is a service usage one. There's a liberal arts college here in the state where I live that's very renowned for their pre-med program. They have a solid advising staff. The pre-med major is well known. And in an effort to help their students, they wanted to get them access to R for statistical analyses. They knew that having that title on your application for med school, that you've been involved in a research project, blows up your chances in a good way to get into the medical school. Having that publication listed there becomes really important. So what can happen in this case? There was this large state institution, actually all three large state institutions have significant R presence and platforms. So what we're working to do with them is help them understand how the state institution can create their R platform as a service and post that service in the InCommon Federation. And then the small liberal arts college can use the InCommon Federation to access that for their students, thereby keeping the student at their place, in this case, the school is called Wartburg, keeping them at Wartburg, but giving them that access to the big school research opportunities. A couple of other ones. This was another major university, 3-university grant, $13 million grant, I believe it was, to study mental health and nursing, right? And so they were working together, and NIH said you have to keep all of your data in a Google Drive. So one of the schools has no Google presence whatsoever. So the opportunity would be here to stand up their version of Google as an SP and let the other schools hit that via the InCommon Federation versus any other type of bilateral trust. And it just becomes that much easier. Then it's already set up the one time, and it's ready to go. More stuff, course sharing. I alluded to this earlier. This is a group, there's a consortium called IDEA of 20 schools, and we are working with them because they have an established program. It's been there for, I want to say 17 years that they've been doing this course sharing. And they're large campuses, and they tend to be in their ag areas because ag is really expensive. And these small schools can't stand up an ag program tomorrow, but by doing this, they do this course sharing, and it's Clemson and North Dakota State and South Dakota State and Mizzou, and I could rattle through the list, K-State. But they've been doing this for a while, and what's happening is each one of the schools issues credentials to each one of the students, and the students are then forced to remember the credential for that particular school that they're taking a course from. They might be taking it from 3 or 4 different schools. Their home school is K-State, but I have to have Mizzou credentials and I have to have North Dakota State credentials. And it's not a showstopper, but it's been referred to as a rock in the shoe of the student. It's just an annoyance. And things would work a lot better if we were able to do just single sign-on. So I could sign in to any of these other schools with my K-State credentials. And we are in the process of working with them right now. We've been, I don't know, about a year probably, and we've just wrapped up the exploration part. And we are now working with them to come up with a toolkit or playbook about how we might be able to help them send this out to their 20 schools. And I've since probably had a half a dozen conversations, most recently with Claflin and Clemson. If you're familiar with Claflin University, they had a similar thing. They were very interested in doing some course sharing because that dual punch of the enrollment cliff and the reduced budget to these schools, they're trying to hang on to their students, but giving them the opportunities of the other places. And this has a lot of promise. It also includes like things like library access and all of the problems that we all struggle with, software titles that are specific to courses. So stay tuned in this space. There'll be more to come here. So I rattled through a whole lot of things. Hopefully one or more of those use cases is something that like, oh yeah, we have something like that or a situation like that. And now I think I'm turning it back over to Jean.
Yeah, well, yeah, like you said, Rami, I hope some of these use cases are really like locking in. And we see your question, Robert, and we will definitely get to your
Sorry.
question. No, it's okay. I think we can. No, I know it's total focus time, but a lot of times people say, "Why should we join? What's in it for me? Why should I care? Why do I want to be part of the Federation?" And I think a couple things that I just want to highlight out of this slide. Obviously, you can read all of these things, but it's not just about the technology, right? It's about trust. So with InCommon Federation, with eduroam, we are creating a vetted, community-driven trust fabric. Rami loves that word, fabric. I do too. That really allows institutions to do these things securely, and it takes a little bit of the worry off and a lot of the burden of administration off of your plates. Because you're not having to manage every single login with every single service. It's much more streamlined because it's going through a seamless, secure point. As we mentioned, this is standardized protocols that help really protect user privacy and security. Everybody's worried about security right now, and this really helps fortify that ability. I'm sure you get a lot of help desk issues, and really this is helping to reduce friction. Institutions avoid duplicate identity management, and that's because we have agreements in place. That's because the way that this works helps reduce friction all the way around. A lot of folks wonder, am I going to be placed under some, specific requirements about what I can and can't share? No, you're in charge of what you can share and how you do that. And so you have complete flexibility and accountability for that. We talked about eduroam and Federation in the United States, but through EduGain, users can connect with international audiences too. So if you have researchers, if you have others who are needing that kind of international connection and collaboration, it's now possible. And because this is community driven, the community is helping to shape these policies. The community is helping to shape those protocols or build them so that it's meeting some of the requirements that are coming from, say, NIH and otherwise. So these are just a couple of key points. Go to the next slide, Rami, because, as we think about, before we get to that, so this is just a really quick infographic of,
Okay, sorry.
This is one. No, you're good.
Okay, good.
This is the one that just kind of shows the Federation at scale, right? How many organizations are already in Federation globally, and how many services that you might have access to. And I think the most important piece of this slide is the bottom, which is this powerful network effect. Each participant really adds value as they join the Federation to the entire ecosystem, because as you're bringing additional identities or services into this trusted framework, more access, more collaborations can be happening, and this extensive reach really makes this Federation one of the farthest, biggest in the United States. So now you can go to the next one, Rami. So why does this all matter for KeystoneREN and what you have going on? And when we think about RENs, when we think about regional networks, you're probably connected physically to the network, a network, right? But the Federation and eduroam helps to connect you digitally. And that makes your access, your partnerships with each other a lot more effortless and seamless. And the good news is, you probably have the infrastructure in place or already running, and Federation and eduroam sort of lays on top of that so that it makes your ability to connect to the bigger ecosystem a little bit easier. I don't know if this applies to you, but it might now or in the future. And Jennifer, you might be saying a few words about this at the end. But having a federated identity foundation strengthens your pitch for grants, workforce development, public-private partnerships, because you're already, sort of connected and in, if you will. And speaking of which, you can address federal security requirements. Rami already mentioned the ones about MFA. NIH is having more requirements coming out, and you can do this collectively rather than each of you having to independently solve it. And Robert, we're going to get to you, but this next point really is, course sharing. If you're going to go there, if you're thinking about it strategically, it becomes infinitely easier if you do it through with a federated access as your backbone to be able to core share. So a lot of value for a REN to be participating both in eduroam and federation. Go to that next slide. So what does it mean to get from here to there? Well, in these next few slides, we've tried to bubble it up to the highest possible set of steps. Obviously, there's a lot behind each of these steps, so just very quickly, and you'll see that they're very similar. If you want to get connected to eduroam, you got to do a little evaluation of what you have going on already in terms of your wireless capabilities. You got to work together with IT folks to figure out what kind of deployment strategy you want to have. You'd then complete the eduroam subscription with us. You'd set up and configure Radius so that you have your authentication infrastructure all ready to go, and then you deploy your SSID so that you can go ahead and implement your wireless network. Sounds simple. It is. Go to the next one too, because equally, if you're wanting to join InCommon Federation, there's a few steps. And we have a lot of stuff in the works that will hopefully streamline this process as well. But obviously, to join the Federation, you have to make sure what you have going on under the hood, as I like to say, is ready to go. You have to be sort of Federation ready. So that's everything from what do you have going on with your infrastructure, as well as your staff. And a lot of times you have to go back to your stakeholders to say, well, what services do you need access to? What do you want to collaborate? What resources are out there that you're needing? What are your researchers needing? So you kind of have to do a little bit of due diligence with your stakeholders just to make sure you're connecting in all the right ways. The official step is to sign our participation agreement. That's a legal document that you have to sign. But once that's done, you can set up your identity provider. That's the driver's license that Rami was talking about, and all the things that you want to share. And then you get to share that metadata so that it's done in a secure way. And then you connect to those services or those other resources. So we have ways that we can help, which brings us to, we're cruising right along here, this final slide, because we support institutions in all ways, not just Federation and eduroam, but in many other ways. But we're here. That's where sort of the InCommon Academy and some of our other services come into play. We have developed a comprehensive learning and engagement pathway that you can, airdrop in, or we can curate, specific cohort programs that are tailored just for KeystoneREN, should you want that. But just to give you a little broad sweep of what this slide is all about, Basecamp on the left, we just did this, and I don't know if any of your staff members attended, but this is our 5-day virtual event, and it's ideally suited for those who are new to IAM. And so this is the foundation underneath the underpinnings of Federation and eduroam. And so it's a great entry point for those who are new, both to the field as well as maybe the institution, and just getting connected to the broader community that we all work within. This next little grouping, as I mentioned, we have training on all of our services. And so this is an opportunity to have your IT and technical teams and business analysts and help desk people boost their skills in these open source software components that actually make your infrastructure run. So we publish our trainings on our website. So if any of these are ringing a bell, or you're thinking, yeah, I need grouper training, we have options for you, but we are developing more Federation training, and we do have eduroam training as well. This middle next part called accelerator programs, this is what we consider to be maybe most applicable to KeystoneREN. We've just done something like this for the New Jersey Edge REN regional network, where we put a cohort of institutions through a program to help them get onboarded into the Federation and moving them forward and getting them connected. But an accelerator is just a very focused, time-bound program that involves some structured learning, some peer and collaboration problem solving together, but it helps you to move your IAM initiatives as well as perhaps your Federation connectivity forward in a much more accelerated way, hence the words and the names. We have webinars that I don't know if you've ever tuned into our IAM Onlines, but they're mostly monthly webinar series where we feature all different kinds of topics, anything from thought leadership to practical know-how to upcoming trends. And we have another one coming up in July on a new tool that InCommon is launching. So you might want to know about that. Finally, we have a few things that are sort of on the tail end, which is where you have community-driven opportunities, whether that's attending TechX and tuning into the IAM track. We call that Camp Week, by the way. But there's other ways to engage with InCommon community, whether that's through working groups or other advisory pathways, or even being mentors or speakers at some of our things. And we mentioned the catalysts, but they're here. They know the higher ed and research, and they know the technical challenges that R&E faces, and they know how to help. So we're happy to connect you with any of them. So anyway, I think that brings us really, Rami, to the end of our spiel and our overview. So now we'd love to know what's resonating with you, what questions you have, and we can definitely answer Robert's question now. So Rami, I don't know if you want to take that one to
Oh,
start with.
sorry, I didn't see it.
And while Rami's reading,
Oh,
I want to thank you both so much for doing this for our community. So delighted to have you. I know how busy you both are. So the fact that you took special time out of your busy schedules to come and talk to Keystone Ren and the community we're very, very grateful. I have a couple of my own questions, but I'd want to turn it over and make sure we get everyone else's questions answered. And so why don't we go ahead and start with Robert's? Rami, I can read it for you if you want.
I've
Okay.
got it now. So the cross college course sharing, that has just exploded in the last couple of years as schools start to look at this. So your banner SIS schools, do you know what LMS do you use? Are you Canvas schools?
D2L, Brightspace.
D2L, okay. So that's the interesting thing about the IDEA project is all of the LMSs are represented there. So there's D2L, there's Moodle, there's Blackboard, and Canvas is by far the biggest one. So we are really working at this in a four-pronged way. So we're trying to make sure we understand the technical requirements and how the solutions might work. Nebraska ran a SHIB proxy that they ran a pilot for that particular group of schools that they're just ending right now and figuring out what the results were and how we want to move forward. But we have not done that specifically, but it's where we're going right now. So I would love to take your name and talk more with you about that. It's interesting, the IDEA group, I could talk forever about the IDEA course sharing thing because it's fascinating to me. They've developed their own SIS. So it's just for those. So each school has its main SIS, whatever it is, if it's Aleutian or whomever. And they also have this smaller one that the IDEA staff developed. So they exchange grades that way. It's a little less automated, I think, than a lot of folks would like to do, but that's how they keep it integrated. So I'm going to write your name down and would love to talk more about this.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would love to talk to you about that too, Bob. So I think that there's tremendous opportunity around the course sharing for the community colleges, the PASHE schools. There's so much collaboration and opportunity there just in Pennsylvania. So we will definitely continue that discussion as we go down this path. So Jerry, I see you've taken, your camera is on again. Do you have a question for Rami and Jean?
I do. And I was just looking, actually, I partly answered my own question by going out onto the website because I'm thinking which of the Maryland University System schools are already involved with Federation through InCommon. So I didn't look at them all, but the reason I'm looking is tomorrow I have a meeting with about a half a dozen researchers. One of the things we're exploring is whether or not researchers from research centers and smaller colleges and universities can make use of high performance computing resources at the big dogs. So College Park, UMBC, UMB. And we're meeting with College Park tomorrow. And these are all researchers that are not at College Park. They are at UMCES, which is the Environmental Research Center. They're at Towson. They're at University of Maryland Eastern Shore. And the very first question I know is going to come up is going to be authentication to their HPC. And I don't know how that would work. They talked already in just a preliminary conversation. They talked about having to set up UMD, which would be College Park credentials. And I'm thinking, couldn't InCommon work around that? I don't know. I'm just wondering if there's a play there.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
it's not dissimilar to the New Jersey Edge project Gene was just talking about, because it was Rutgers who was attempting to share their high performance computing cluster with the other schools, and they had been doing it at a network access level, which is fine, but it doesn't scale to all the other things that it was Jeremy we were talking with at Rutgers about that. But yeah, there is a place to play in that space where you could set up the access to large instrumentation, even microscopes, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pilot that we're doing this summer because we want to get this group of faculty access. We're really concerned about what level of support they're going to need. And if College Park were agree to roll this out to all of the other campuses, then there's another 11 campuses, what would be the impact from a support point of view? But the first thing would be access, how you manage it. I mean, this is going to be a learning process, but the first thing is going to be to get these half a dozen researchers into the HPC environment. So I'll ask them tomorrow. I see College Park is already involved with Federation, InCommon Federation.
Yes, yep.
So I don't know how that would wrap around, how they would roll that to these half a dozen researchers, or whether the institutions, for example, the Environmental Center they are members of eduroam, but they don't have InCommon Federation.
Yep, that happens a lot. I would love to hear more. And Jennifer, if you want to, I don't know if you're participating in this. I don't know what the relationship is, but I would love to know where the 6 researchers are from specifically. Are they all Maryland system schools? You said maybe a couple were not Maryland system schools. Is that right?
Well, they're all under the umbrella.
Okay,
now.
so they are.
Yeah. Yeah. They're just from very different institutions, but they all have different credentials at their own schools. And we've been actually wondering about, because we actually maintain our own authentication to our MDREN site. And, that would be a lot easier if they could just use their own. And we've been asked a number of times how they could use, their InCommon type of federation.
Yep. That is a great use case.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're neighbors of our Pennsylvania friends, so they invited us to attend. So we're not sneaking in the back door.
That's okay. We allow stealth attendees to come, but I will
That's
say
actually how we met Jennifer. She was at one of Farou's NJ Edge things. So I like it that you guys all share. That's easier for everyone.
And I would just offer, and I'll aim this at Jennifer, but if there's follow-on conversations that we want to organize, just to dive a little bit more deeply into each of these questions or scenarios, because we can figure out, how we might be able to help you move your plans along.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that sort of facilitated individual discussion, is probably the way to go. I'm sure you both wish it were a little bit simpler, but it's probably merits just an individual call, Jerry, to talk through your case, which, by the way, Jerry, is very similar to sort of what we are looking to work with Gene and Rami to do here with the Pennsylvania Science DMZ, and obviously expansion to any sort of regional science DMZ opportunities. So that's exactly the kind of thing. And I see that Ken is on video as well, so he may have some thoughts and want to share some things. But getting access to HPC, to, large instruments, to facilities at these research institutions for smaller campuses, for the liberal arts colleges, for the community colleges as part of the DMZ efforts in Pennsylvania and beyond is exactly why, we're sort of having these conversations to really seed that. So this is fantastic. And you're not stealth at all. We're delighted you're here. And did you want to add anything to that while you're on video there, wherever you're heading?
Yeah, and some of these things keep coming up related to, even the workshop we had with Globus last week. There are hooks in Globus to allow you to federally authenticate to compute resources and things like that. However, if you don't have the InCommon set up, a lot of people, we learned this at the RCSI workshop early in the month, that they just click on their Google Authenticator if they are a Google Campus or Google Workspace. And that sometimes there's some extra level of programming and identity mapping you got to do based on Google Authenticator versus your InCommon Authenticator. So the one campus was saying, no, do not use the Google. Make sure you use the InCommon so we can do the identity mapping correctly. So there are different pieces around that that kind of tie these things together. So yeah, these common threads keep happening like this. So it's, we're kind of working through everything. So, but.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So in our remaining time, I wanted to give the floor a little bit to a couple of the other campuses that are on to see if there's any questions either from, and I'm going to call you out because we're small, but Villanova or Bucks or anyone else that might have questions that haven't been answered, or any particular use case you might want to bring up. Would be great while you have Rami and Jean live to ask any questions directly that may be lingering. Anything from you, Chris, on the
I didn't have any questions. I was here to get some orientation. As you know, we're doing more with the expanding our research capabilities and collaborative research. And I wanted to know, I'm here because I'm interested in knowing what's available and how we can make this connection. Um, I'm not seeing I'm not seeing any projects right now where we have a big need for this, but I know there's some coming.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'm just trying to get my feet in the water, and
Yeah,
so to
that's
speak,
great.
because I'm gonna be back asking questions more.
Was this is a question for all of you. Was this overview helpful? Did it help clarify some things? Yeah.
Very,
Okay,
very helpful.
great.
Yeah, I would say from a KeystoneREN standpoint, maybe Jerry can, I'm not sure on your end either, but a lot of what people are asking for first is eduroam, and some schools have Google education for authentication, and some will have Microsoft out there. So if there's even like a cheat sheet on how to kind of get set up with something like that, because people then start asking, well, what is InCommon then? And there's kind of confusion about one or the other. So if there's a way to actually show how to, get authentication working for eduroam through either Microsoft or Google, that's a lot of the use cases that we're coming up with. So if that could be anything else out there, even like a quick walkthrough or something like that, that's what a lot of the smaller schools are struggling with. And then once we talk to them, the InCommon comes up a lot of times afterwards for collaboration and things like that. So.
And Ken, I'm going to reframe that. I think it's a great question to ask, but Rami, we talked and we laughed about dispelling some myths. Are there some myths in there that could be dispelled in terms of, I know we get like, well, do you have to be an InCommon subscriber to do eduroam? And the answer to that is what? No.
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 So the answer is no, right? People don't know that. Do you, there's just myths like that I think are part of the challenge and the obstacles that is holding
Yeah.
up some of these folks that are pulled in so many directions and wearing so many hats. So, Ken, I think great point in terms of, one of the first things we're hearing is wanting to get started with eduroam. The will is there, right?
Yeah.
So know that folks want to get started. Jean, I love the idea of the accelerator, right? So how do we, how do we remove those barriers? How do we accelerate that and just get things unstuck when people know that they want eduroam, where are the barriers and how do we get rid of them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, eduroam's a great example of that. I don't know, we did eduroam training earlier this year, but I don't know that we've done an accelerator for that. But you know, the price point of eduroam is not in any way. I mean, for the smallest schools, it's $400 a year. So that's like literally, I would pay that. But it's that, like you're saying, Ken, the technical aspect and the radius integration. Like how do I don't have radius? What do I do? Is there a hosted radius service? These are all the kinds of things that we're talking about right now. And what would it take with Microsoft or whomever to have that capability? I'm taking lots of notes on things we might come back and talk about in the future, or follow up, or like you said, the one-to-one conversations.
I would agree with Ken that your engineers on your small, medium, even the large campuses, when you go out to the website, it's a lot of high level. What can this do for me? Well, engineers only want to know what is it? What are the pieces and what do I have to do? And it's not very clear. And I think I've sat in on a few and now I understand it, but it was the components of it were difficult for me to understand from the things that were out there.
Yeah.
And the other question is people don't understand what they're already entitled to with their Internet 2 membership.
Yeah.
So if I'm paying an Internet 2 membership, is eduroam a part of it? Yeah. Well,
Yep.
I know that now, but I never knew that before. I know that, InCommon there's more stuff that needs to be done there. I don't know if there's a fee for it. And then you have InCommon certificates, which are a totally different thing. And we do know that we have to pay extra for that, but none of that's really clear.
Got it.
And I think
great
that's what
feedback.
holds people. I really think that's what holds people back, because once you figure it all out, and any good engineer should be able to look at one sheet of paper and figure out eduroam at least. You understand that, well, I could do this in an afternoon. This isn't um and the cost is minimal, so we should just do it. But without that understanding, it's hard to get to push people.
Yeah.
Do you need to end, Jennifer, or can I answer that one?
I do not need to end. And if
Okay.
you're on, please answer. That's
You
great.
you are spot on, Brad. Everything you just said is 100% right. And we started this new strategic planning thing a couple of years ago called Futures 2, and that's exactly what came out of it. Is we don't talk about ourselves in a way that's very understandable, that is clear, that people understand. You have to get this to get this, but if you have that, you already get this thing and that piece. So that whole thing, we've been working on that now for a year. And actually, one of those slides was one of our new one pagers. It was that Federation funnel one that had all the
Infographic.
because people understand that. And I was at a talk. I can't remember who, Rob Carter, and he said InCommon is great, but you start about 3 feet above the road. And so if you have enough staff that you can get to that 3 feet level, then you're golden. Then it's what you're saying. If you know where to look and if you understand it. But we're working right now to bridge that 3 feet. And so we're trial ballooning some things with you guys for sure. And I'm seeing nods, and we tried it with Jennifer in January. So I appreciate that feedback. It just really reinforces that we're on the right path. We just need to do it faster.
And I don't think you're on the wrong path. I mean, when end users go look at it, they understand what's out on the website. When engineers look at it, they don't. And that's
Yeah.
Well, even there's CIOs in our space that don't understand what that means. And so there's levels all over the place that we have to get better at communicating what it is we do and why it's important and how it can help. It's really, that's the big thing, is you're all talking about use cases that are exactly things we're thinking about. And the course sharing and the research instrumentation sharing, they're actually not that different at their core. It's the same thing in the center of what you're trying to do. It's just the ways and the other complications around that you have to figure out.
And as a REN, we would love to push, all of our members that are Internet 2 members. We'd like to push them to use it to the fullest extent that they're entitled to. And so we've got to understand it so that we can help,
Right.
you know, push them in the right direction.
That's it. That's it. We want the same thing. We want you guys all using all the things you're paying for. Nothing keeps me up more at night. Jean knows this. The two of us just pull our hair out when I find out somebody's paying for something and they're not using all the pieces of it that could be helpful.
Yeah.
So that's a mission for us.
So anyway, thank you. I'm sorry I took up so much of everybody's
No, it's
time.
okay.
But,
And we're like
appreciate
I said, we're happy to keep going. This is great conversation. We can only accomplish so much in one webinar, but just consider us available if we want to have follow-on conversations.
Thank you. I think this is only the beginning, for sure, for eduroam in Pennsylvania, in Maryland, federations in the region. So this is a great start to several follow-up discussions and opportunities. Rami and Jean, thank you so much for meeting with us, dispelling some myths, giving us this great high-level overview. Please feel free to continue to use us as your test bed environments for
We will.
accelerator.
All your names down. You're all in trouble now.
Good.
So
That's right.
I'll be calling.
We're all on the list. This is fantastic. And thanks everyone for joining.
Yes, thank you.
Were on and the great questions and comments that everyone brought to the discussion. So I guess we'll wrap it up and let everyone get back to their next meetings, which they're now 4 minutes late for. But thanks for joining, and we'll continue the discussions.
Yes, thank you all. We'll be in touch with those we've talked to. So thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Our
Thanks,
pleasure.
Jen.
Take care.